motion to accept the consent agenda?
Move.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Visitors? Visitors?
They're going to, you can take them first here, if that's about the lease.
Okay. You want to talk here? You want to talk in the front? Where would you like? You can go first. I'm going to let you go first.
So we were here to talk about the terms for the agreement to use the Monteith House for the Enosburg Community Center that we're working on. I did send the terms to Polly.
And I put it in a contract, which the contract is coming to them in the latter part of the meeting of whether they agree to the terms. Yeah. And then I think how it works is, if the school board agrees to the terms, then we bring the contract to the select board, and then the select board will sign on their behalf.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And we also had some questions regarding the space. So Steve is actually, he's kind of leading the whole facility space logistics.
So we talked, I think the last time we met, the several rooms of the space are full of a variety of contents. There's one room that's full of like old computer desks, some stuff from Cole Hollow, some stuff from was it a preschool, Nate?
Elementary program
that was there. And Nate pretty much answered the question before this meeting started, but from what I understand, no one in the school system wants anything in there except maybe some of the preschool stuff that needs to be shredded. Is that?
Well, there's student files that would have to be removed and shredded, but everything else is...
So we'd like to get going as soon as we get permission and the contract is in place. And we've got access to a free dumpster through Jim Cameron, who's renovating the Quincy house. He's got a relationship with the dumpster folks and said we can get one basically for nothing. So that as soon as we can get permission to go in there and start cleaning, we are ready to roll.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what the time frame is on your part when people can get in and
So
things that
if we agree tonight, then the contract will go before the select board on Monday, this coming Monday. So as of Monday, you would be under contract, and I would think who was going to remove the files, do we know?
That's what we're just trying to figure out.
Oh, okay, you'll figure that out?
Yeah.
So, but I would think by next week?
Yeah, by Friday to get something.
Friday.
Should I check with you, Michelle? Should I check with you before we proceed, just to make sure everything that you need out of there has been removed?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
So there was an idea of, I'm not saying that we're going to do this, but the possibility of possibly doing some sort of like a sale for some of the items that are there. We see that we don't need them, but they're not necessarily trash. Maybe, you know, to use that money towards the community center. Would that be okay with you guys if we were to do something, pursue something like that?
I don't have any idea what's in there.
Yeah.
Like she said, desks.
Yeah, we went over, a lot of it is from Paul, acquired by Paul Ladd when they thought that was gonna be like an alternative program. He wants none of it, right?
And that was free office equipment that
yeah.
you picked up somewhere along the line.
It's an entire office with like cubicles and cubicles.
He took the cubicles.
I don't recall seeing cubicles in there.
There's no space. Yeah.
Ground floor.
They're just providers.
Computer desks or
There's some old furniture upstairs.
There's like a
There
not
it
big
is,
smart board,
yeah.
not big projector, a small refrigerator. So hope is that
Yeah.
some of the stuff would be used
I
by
wanna
the
check.
community center, if it's usable, and then the idea was
Okay.
to maybe sell some of the stuff to be used to work on the space.
Right.
Do you have any objection?
Rick wants to look. I want to look first. We can let him know.
Well, they would have to know by next week if they're gonna put it in a dumpster or not. You're gonna check it
Rick will check it out.
Just saying, you better get the let out.
Swing by, cold all whenever, and I can bring you over after.
Okay.
Is that good? That good?
Yes, thank you.
Is that it?
I think that's all we want to bring up for now. Yeah, we wanted to just make sure everything else was clear with the agreement. Yeah.
Okay. As soon as it hits the.
Thank you, yeah, it is exciting.
Yeah, it's
I
moving
can't
along.
wait to see what it looks like when you guys are done.
We've got Tegan Duso, who's agreed to help with the training of volunteers and to help put up some guidelines for participants there. She, I think, what was the fellow other guidance person's name?
Justin? I think he's their counselor.
Yes. We met with the two of them, and they're on board and all excited about it, so there's some momentum.
We have some students help build ideas for programming, to use that space to.
Heather's writing the grant so that we can get some funding perhaps, and if not, we'll just be bare bones.
She's good at that.
She is good at that. Yvonne just got a almost $20,000 grant for the rec fields planning
Awesome.
last week, so
Nice.
It's a lot of things happening.
lots going on.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yes, it is. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have to stay for the contractor?
I don't think so, I think it's just our decision, yeah, we're just going through it. Yeah,
You're welcome
So,
to.
Is there anything on it?
select board meeting on Monday?
Yes.
I haven't seen the contract, but is there anything on there that,
You're gonna see it tonight.
okay, good. Is there anything
It was
on
just
there?
basic terms, yeah,
Okay.
nothing out of the ordinary. I don't, you know, like the timeline and, you know, who's responsible for insurance and.
Okay, so nothing that you're worried on this one?
Right,
Okay.
exactly, yeah. Thank you. You're saying?
I'm saying for the longer.
All right, Morgan.
I don't have too much. We did get a draft audit for you guys. There's no findings. We're kind of reviewing it a little more in depth now. I expect that we'll have a final for you to approve in your January meeting. We met to go over next year's budget last week. When we left there, we weren't planning on touching it this meeting. So the stuff that's in your packet this month is really just informational there. This is the week when we should get the equalized pupil count, which will have a big impact on your tax rate next year. It also is the week that we'll get an idea of what we can bill back from other towns for last year's tuition adjustment. So that was not, that's not available yet, so that's not reflected in the financial reports. Once we have that number in there, I think we'll have a firmer number that I can talk with the principals about what we need to freeze if anything for this year.
Work any on our problems that we talked about?
A list of things, yeah, I have some numbers for that. We want to talk about that later.
Okay. I'll talk about it later. Any thoughts?
So Morgan may have to leave before the end of the meeting because there's a workshop.
So why don't you go, why don't we?
So we're talking about things that need to be done coming up, based off of our budget meeting. Some quick estimates on things. We were talking about what needs to be done in the lot with the cracks. And when the estimate was given last year, it was $5,000. That's a year later. cracks have grown or anything like that, so it's not, double digits as of this point. The JACE, it runs 30,000. JACE is the environmental unit, control unit. But there is, the Efficiency Vermont would give us 10,000 to get that done. So it would end up costing 20,000 or thereabouts. I do not know what the cost of getting an electronic key fob system, if that's what we were talking about. I know that was one of the options. I know you're getting that done, but I don't know what it would cost. However, when we were thinking about it, it really would likely only need to happen, at least at the beginning, for that main office, or the main entrance, the entrance down there. I think there was a third place that we identified, but everything else could be, locked by key from there. Again, I don't know what it costs to put in for, 3 doors?
I don't have any numbers yet.
Oh, you don't? Oh, I thought you did.
Not yet.
Okay.
They're just still gathering.
The bleachers, so the bleachers are an ongoing issue because of how they are put back. So it's about the fact that you have to have even pressure, even pushing on each side. If not, if you get, one kid ramming hard here and another not, that's when everything starts to warp and we begin to have damage to the actual track that happens in there. This bleacher size is the largest size that you can have without having a motorized bleacher in and out that keeps everything on one track. And so if you were to really want to make sure that they're saved and maintained, you would probably want to put a motor on there. I have no idea what that would cost, but Doug is looking into that. But that is really what would likely need to happen for those bleachers to be safely maintained and not, torn and twisted every time. Every basketball team uses it. There are a couple of smaller things as well that Doug had on his list from last year that he reminded me of, they're in the $1,000 to $2,000 range really. We're talking a full replacement of the closet doors in the gym, just because they've gotten over the last few years. The equipment shed, Doug insists, down by the ball fields, it does need a new roof. And that was priced out by Cold Hollow at $1,500. And then it looks like we are on the hook, Polly and I talked about this earlier, for putting up a fence along our property. I'm forgetting her name. Preventure's property down over here for the ball fields. And that was priced out at about $2,100. So those are the things.
Where the fence was there, now we gotta put the fence back?
So when this was before my time, I might add, but the application from the school board for the snack shack came before the development review board. And the stipulations, like the conditions of the permit were that there was going to be an agreement between the landowner and the school regarding fences and buffers. So that contract never occurred. So now that the landowner is asking for a fence, you're on the hook to meet your permit requirement. It was in the permit that said conditions, agreement between school and landabutter must be made, i.e. fences. It even says fences. But no contract was ever created between you, the school, and the landowner.
You saw it, Polly?
Yeah, I wrote it.
She sent me a copy.
Yeah, no, I saw. I sent it to Eric.
Yeah.
That says the conditions of the permit. And so what should have happened was the school board should have brought their preventers in and said, okay, what's the agreement that we're gonna make?
Yeah, but they weren't even the landowners when we started the project.
Yeah. No, they were there at the
Oh, they
meeting.
were
Oh, yeah,
No.
yes. They were at the meeting,
So do we probably need to do that now?
correct. So what should happen is they should come in and the school board and the landowner should make a contract. And I'm assuming because they asked for a fence, that in that contract would be a fence.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and we've been able to take some of the cost of that down in this estimate because we have a bunch of 4-foot chain link fence from when we had the play school out back. It wasn't play school, it was,
You might have had,
whatchamacallit, it's that other program.
Triple E Head Sprouts, and I know that's wrong.
It wasn't Triple E, it was
Head
Head
Start.
Start, that's it, it was Head Start. And so they left, they were only there for 2 years, it's in decent shape, and they left all that there, and we have it, but we're gonna need more, and it has to be installed, so.
Yeah, and the other thing is a 4-foot fence going to be acceptable with the...
I think it will be because it's still, the intent is to stop traffic flow.
Okay, so
Kids,
it's just- it's
kids
just,
and adults really
it's
just
just a
kind of
physical
walking
barrier.
right through their garden.
So so they want like what was there, like an L? Is that what
It
they
would be-
want, Polly?
Yeah, it would be.
I don't know what they want.
Well, what we looked at and what we think they want is an L. It would be going
Along
back
the-
to the property line
And then,
and then over to meet the wooden fence that's on that line there.
So can we have, should we have them in to talk about it?
I think that makes
I
sense.
think it does make sense. And because that way we would be in compliance of our permit too.
So is that, can you invite them to the next meeting to come in?
okay.
What's their last name?
Preventer. And I can I'll send the board the permit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that it, Eric?
For, the costs and all that, yeah.
And then-
I can dig up some more.
No, that's fine. That's
That
fine.
parking lot doesn't need to be sealed, doesn't need seal coating on it.
The estimate that we did was for those cracks to be filled.
Okay.
And so I don't know if they would come back and say it needs to be filled and sealed or what have you after, another season or two had gone on it. But that was a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And I contacted Regional Planning Commission about grants regarding drainage and what have you.
Good job, Polly.
Thanks. So, the clean water money is gone. However, that seems to be the top of the agenda for the next legislative session, is bringing in more clean water money for projects like that. However, there are other projects for drainage, but they would be looking for something a little more, what's the word? Substantial or progressive. Like, there's grants out there that aren't going to just create drainage where you're just dumping it in the wastewater. That pond, that pool I was talking about would get us those kinds of grants. But as far as just having grants to dump water into our wastewater system, that money is gone.
Shell has a pond out there.
Yes.
It's a parking lot.
Exactly. So,
The little
but.
kids would love that.
Yeah, exactly. They would. But, so hopefully next legislative session, there'll be more conversation about money, because it's gone.
Okay.
Yeah. And as far as the conversation about buildings and all that, select board meeting's on Monday.
Oh, about our other,
Yeah, the
Yep.
idea.
Morgan, did you find any money? No. Just trying to be positive. Are you-
He's
is that all?
positive he didn't find it.
Yeah, you're positive. Okay. Is that all, Morgan, or?
That's all I have, yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything for Morgan?
Nope.
Nate?
Probably not a great time to share one of our students' proposal, but it was sent to you Google Docs. He might, he's building a storage unit for a new shooting machine, I think. But, so he is proposing a long-term plan for the Red Barn and the Monteith House. It's, again, I didn't make copies, but it did get sent to you. He's suggesting that the construction class tear down those two buildings and rebuild this conference center / construction.
It was sent to Michael or all of us?
All you guys. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't get it.
It just happened about an hour ago.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Because I forgot to bring hard
Oh,
copies.
you're busy.
Okay.
It's not, so it's something where it's editable and you could ask questions and it is just, it's part of, it's somewhat realistic, but it's also part of their proposal
Right.
unit. So he is proposing that it's, the barn's an eyesore and you already have sewer and water, so it could be a long-term construction project over many, many years to tear those two buildings down and replace it with a lot of different ideas. One being construction classroom and some lab spaces, other being a conference center, other being a multi-purpose building, could be potentially the teen center. So that's just a proposal. It's there. So take a look at it and feel free to ask questions and comment, and Mr. Brandon Stanley will address those. And then just other updates. The biggest one, we had successful participation in the tractor parade, our Seth Hungerford Construction and Diversified. I think we're down there with about 10 students who braved the elements. And the big one that you guys are invited to on December 20th is our FFA annual wild game dinner. So between 10:45 and 11:30 would be the best time to come if you can make it. I would suggest that if you could, it is definitely a sight to see.
Bring a change of clothes.
You will.
Really, did we get the butcher?
No, you just smell like it all the rest of it.
Students are cooking their.
No, they don't butcher it.
Well, I was wondering. Change
There's
of
a lot of
clothes.
grease and butter and meat.
It
I
is just
think it's pretty much all meat,
but-
so. I don't know any wild game that's not meat.
Lacking on the vegetable department?
Oh, yes.
They're fried potatoes.
Yes.
The hunter part gets covered, the gatherer part not so
Right.
much.
That's what they want to expand upon.
It's during the school day?
Yeah.
During the school day. So, you say your students will be asking to come over there all day long. It's, if you're there for the program, they're there for the program, and then AT time is when they can sign up to be over there. Kids will be trying to be over there all day.
Well, what time are these people invited?
10:45 to 11:30 is the ideal time, so you can also see the students that are. So, it's definitely worth it. And we have a lot of various members of the community come in. We have connections to the game warden because they bring us some wild game at times, so 3 or 4 game wardens will be there. And local hunters of the area, the Damien Bluins of the world, stop in with some goose to donate.
That's cool.
It's delicious. There's a lot of frying things going on at one time. Good stuff.
And really, that's it. So,
Thank you. Michelle?
All right, so just a couple of information items there, making sure you know that tomorrow the parking lot will be packed. It'll be our K-3 concert, so it's usually the biggest event, and certainly hope there's no big basketball game going on tomorrow, but it'll certainly be good. And then next week on December 18th is the 4th of 5th grade concert. And then I just put in a little note in there about training that we had with a person from Prevent Child Abuse Vermont, Lori Howe, who came and she talked to the full staff and trained us about Act 1 training, just sexual abuse prevention training. And she also has been working with our school counselor, Danielle Hansen, to teach lessons at both the pre-K through grade 2 or grade 3 level, and then also 4th and 5th grade level, and provided our school with curricular materials free of cost because we agreed to do the staff training, and we also will give pre and post assessments, surveys to the kids about some of the lessons. I did not bring a copy of the scope and sequence so you could see the topics, but they're basically, it was around just helping a child know what healthy relationships look like, setting boundaries, different things that would, at the appropriate grade level, would be important for them to know to stay safe. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. And that's all I have, unless you have questions for me.
Any questions? Thank you, Michelle. Rachel?
I also just have some informational things. Our winter concert is this Thursday, December 13th at 7. And we've been running a food drive for several weeks as we return from Thanksgiving. So middle school students have collected a lot of items so far, and tomorrow's our last day. So we'll be hopefully bringing those items over to the food truck later this week. Final donation. And just in case you hear anything, I think Eric might bring this up as well, but we did our first Alice evacuation drill that led us through town today. We did a rally point drill where the students exited the school and went to an alternate location. So if you hear of an entire student population
Walking on
the streets through town, it's because they did, and it was as a practice. So we did our practice today. Eric and I decided to keep those separate just because we recognized that the parking lots we'd be accessing would be filled up, and we weren't quite sure how it would go the first time, so we thought to keep it simple, we'd do middle and high school separate for our first round of this type of practice. So we practiced today, and Eric's students will practice tomorrow.
So how does that work? Do you have a predetermined?
Yeah.
Yeah, so depending on where students are in the building, they have some predetermined locations they would go to, and the rally point's a place for them to meet up, so if they have to really quickly just get away from the school, it's a spot they know to go to where there will be teachers, where there will be more information they can hear about what to do next.
Okay, so there's multiple points.
Two.
Okay, two?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
Same with our building, we have two, but we're not running across streets.
okay, you know?
It's just,
We on the
So
other
you have
hand,
two spots in the building?
No.
out in the community, in fact, far enough from the school that the school's no longer in line of sight.
Right. One of ours, I guess, is it safe to tell everybody? It's
Is
on
it
camera.
necessary?
Well, no,
Yeah.
I have to, we're doing our drill tomorrow, and I'm curious if you know whether or not there are any services happening tomorrow.
There aren't, no. I actually was gonna bring that up
Yeah.
at some point at the
I
meeting
thought
that
about
you
that too.
had. That is an option, and we have a lot of space in there.
Yeah.
And it's.
Well, it would be
very
outside.
Oh, okay.
I had meant to call you
But if
guys last
ever
week to
it's
say,
like
is it okay if
20
we come over?
Yeah.
But, yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
it's
be in
fine.
the parking lot, but the rally point is near there.
That's fine.
I don't know if we should have this but they did practice, middle school practice today, and we share our both of our rally points with high school.
Good.
That's all I have.
Eric? My name is also all informational. Again, the rally point drill, we'll be doing that tomorrow. It's not technically, I mean, it's a drill, but it's just us walking to those points essentially. It's not like everybody run to get out at this point. So you may hear about that as well. We have more kids and we might be louder, so it might be more recognized that high school is not in the building. Secondly, I just had a little blurb in my report just about Lindsay Morris and us having a behavior specialist on staff, and what a great asset that is for us, and it's something we should consider doing as it's, we're using this person not just to support a specific population of students with behavioral needs, but also to support teachers in dealing with those students throughout classes as well. It's been a real it's been a real nice surprise to have, you know, something that we thought wasn't going to work out just because we lost a special educator turn into something that's really beneficial. So. And then the only other thing that I have is actually Jessica, who was going to talk just a little bit informationally about restorative justice and restorative practices and what that's looking like in school, just so you have kind of an idea of what that is when you're coming up.
So I thought I could just describe sort of how we came to be where we are. So in the fall of 2016, we were having some student conflict. At this time I was a classroom teacher on the leadership team, and Mr. Remmers and some other faculty were fresh from seeing what the Center for Restorative Justice in St. Albans was up to and how schools were implementing some of that. And it sounded intriguing to me, so I jumped in and we quickly brought a restorative justice committee to our school with the help of the folks from the CJC in St. Albans, which is actually FGIRCJC, I think. But anyways, so a consultant there helped us establish this group, and the goal was for there to be a student-led group with diverse staff and faculty kind of addressing issues and conflict in the school. And it became a passion of mine quickly. So from there, I actually became a consultant on restorative practices and restorative justice, in which I learned that we sort of skipped over a step, which is better practice and better way of establishing restorative practices and restorative justice in school, and that is establishing whole school buy-in and doing some professional development. So, you know, if I were to summarize kind of how we're using RP and RJ in our school, is that it's in pockets, and there's a lot of positivity happening, but I think you know, the goal right now is to kind of back up a little bit and try to implement sort of the first step, which is restorative justice can be described into three tiers, where the first is the one that addresses the entire school population and establishes circle practice as a way of building community and getting to know one another, so that when tier 2 happens, which would be like someone broke a rule, or on our school discipline rubric, it's often an option to do a circle instead of a lunch detention or an in-school suspension places. Tier 2 can happen because Tier 1 has been positive and the students sort of know the routine. What happens adversely is that we start doing circles. Kids think that circles are only what happens when bad things happen. So we're trying to build in more Tier 1. So last Monday...
Jessica, can you just quickly describe what a circle is?
Sure.
Some of them might not know.
Yep, so it's a group of people sitting in a round and using a talking piece, so it can be anywhere from 4 to 100 people. Tier 1 circles could be an entire group of students sitting around, so I can pass out a few things. This is the first page of the newsletter that's going to go out into January, and this is just a draft. So that's a snapshot of me sitting on the other side of a circle with freshman academy classes, so it's all of Mrs. Cribb's freshman academy classes, and I've been visiting there monthly, and we've talked about all kinds of things about being successful in school, to last time we talked about sexual harassment. So it's a very sort of ceremonial system that's used. So when I say talking piece, I really mean there's a thing that you have and you can only talk if you have that. And it's a routine that kids are more and more familiar with. Kids in Bakersfield do circles all the time, in some classes almost every day. And they're happening in classes more and more. So last Monday we had Annie O'Shaughnessy, who's a consultant who's also working with Richford High School, come and do a half-day kind of retreat with us. So we had 6 faculty and 10 students get trained on how to run circles successfully. And we're kind of encouraging people to do a Tier 1 challenge for the month of December. So a couple anecdotal examples of that are Casey Larson, our PE teacher, is using circles in Tier 1 to do short circles with her class to both build camaraderie before an activity and also look at learning goals. Tom Plog in Social Studies is using them in psychology class to activate background knowledge for psychology concepts. And Carly Brassord has used one recently in art to kind of establish a new respect agreement in a foundation art class. So to better explain what Tier 2 circle could look like, I have a sort of a draft skeleton of what those look like. So the Restorative Justice Committee, the RJC here at school, uses a version of this when we get a referral from the Peace Planning Room to do a circle for responding to harm. So what those most consistently look like is a student who has repeatedly disrupted the learning environment. And so that, that can take on different forms of whatever that behavior was. But typically, in those circles would take place in my office with a student having met before, use this template to build a script. And then the student leads the group with me present. And then there are the student, any teacher, maybe somebody who's like an ally to the student, that could be another student or their advisor. So we shoot for like, 6 to 8 people in those circles. So that's what that could look like. Another thing we've done is a conference or sort of conference. This is often a really great way to help students who are having a conflict with a teacher or another faculty, or they feel like they're not clicking or they're really not getting along or something's not going right. This is a pretty, this is a 2-pager, sorry for all this paper. Here are the questions. An example would be last year in art class, a student was using the facilities in art and had left a pretty upsetting note to the teacher and was not being very respectful. So we wanted to try to approach this situation creatively. So kind of coming together and talking about what happened, who was affected, what needs to be done to make that right. That can be like a little mediation with me kind of at the center. The last thing I'll share is these cards that we made, the Restorative Justice Committee made last spring, and then I distributed this so that every teacher has a copy. So on one side, it sort of shows the 3 different tiers and then a description of our RJC here at school. And on the other side are these well-established questions that are best practice for teachers to use to build a more restorative classroom, where I think probably everyone at this table was in school. If you were in trouble, the teacher would maybe call on you and embarrass you in front of the whole class and hope that you behave. So the first step into establishing a more restorative space is to have that done in a bit more productive of a way. And then also traditional discipline might say, what rule did you break and how should we punish you? Whereas restorative justice says, what happened, who was affected, what do we need to do to make things right? And it's proven to be more and more effective. There's lots of research and evidence to show that. And so my goals and the goal of the RJC is to have the capacity for our school to have more students asking for circles. Right now it's typically mostly adults coming and saying we need a circle. I'd love to see more students voicing that those are needed. That more of the school can run all kinds of circles, and at least 50% of the faculty being able to run tier 2 circles. Right now I feel a bit spread thin with the demand for them. There are a few adults that can do it. I'd like to see 100% of our staff using the kind of restorative dialogue that you see on that card. And then of course to reduce the referrals to the peace room. So that's what I had prepared to share with you. Oh, the last thing I could say is that this book is really kind of a workbook and a resource full of scripts for all different kinds of circles and resources. So if really anything comes up, whether it's you just want to get to know your students better or something really serious happened in class, I managed to purchase one for every department. So I'm trying to build that so that eventually everybody will have their own. And it's a great resource.
Good stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, it is. It's great to see kids engage in this, instead of just a traditional, silent lunch or detention or something like that. When kids come out with something meaningful, having had a meaningful conversation with, what have you, whether it be with Jessica or a group of teachers or other students, it definitely has more impact than sitting at lunch for 30 minutes. Sometimes that works too, but we use both, right? So we have this option as well as some of our more traditional options of detentions and things like that. But we like to be able to use this when it makes the most sense. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn?
So on my superintendent's report, you can see that I've given you, for budgeting purpose, the list of all the people who gave us salary advancement notification by December 1st, which is a requirement in your master agreement. So you have 11 people making salary advancement this year based on additional education, additional credits that they have earned. One person is making a pretty big move, so Seth has earned the National Industry Credential for construction, so he'll be moving from bachelor's to master's, which is pretty exceptional. Several people moving from bachelor's to either 15 or 30, and some people earning a master's degree or beyond this year. You have one situation that, so for nurses, you have a nurse at the elementary school who are able to hire and pay her at the B step 1 level. So she had what's considered an RN license, but it was not a 4-year degree. So the deal was that she needed to earn the 4-year degree. She was able to, she will be earning that or has already earned it. So when that person came to us, they had some experience that we didn't count on the steps because she didn't yet have the degree. Now that she's getting it, it seems to make sense to give her some movement based on experience. So because that experience was not an education, it wouldn't be 1 year of service, 1 step. But what we've done in the past is if it's in something like a health field, we've given 1 step for every 2 years of service. So what I intend to do for her is to give her this 3 steps for the experience, the 6 years, and then the step for earning the additional year working for us.
Yep.
So no one gave me a December 1st retirement notice from Enosburg, so I don't know if other principals had expected me to receive anything, but I didn't receive anything. I have no student issues for this portion of the meeting. We have dates that are now set for teacher and support staff negotiations that'll be going over with our council members at tomorrow night's meeting. So our goal is to begin teacher contract negotiations in January. We have a few meetings scheduled now that we'll be sharing, and we're hoping, this is probably a lofty goal, but we're hoping we can wrap it up before March. And then we have some dates scheduled tentatively for support staff negotiations in, Morgan, April? Was it April or March?
Start at the end of March.
End of March into April. So we're moving forward with that process. So you all know that we talked at your meeting on Tuesday about board membership. With your new merged board, it looks like the board decided that it will be Rick and Polly who will be serving on the transitional board. So I just want to remind everyone that there will be a special meeting on January 2nd at 5 o'clock in the Richford High School cafeteria. And at that time, you will be going through, you'll be going through a warning. It's kind of an organizational meeting. Morgan, was I going to go over that warning here, or I was going to do that on the 18th?
We're doing that on the 18th.
Okay. All right. So there are several parts to the organizational meeting. That's something that actually the Secretary of Education warns, which he did. So we'll go through, we're going to have just a committee meeting on the 18th with 2 members of the Enosburg Transitional Board and 2 members from Richford. Not to have an actual board meeting, but just let you see what that warning is and talk through in advance of that meeting what it'll look like. So one thing I just want to plant a seed about is your new district will need a name that it's in the warning that we'll consider a name for the new district. So hoping people can start thinking about that, thinking about ideas that they have for the new district. And then we could do a survey link where people can put their recommendations in there, however you want to do it. I know that the board members who were here earlier in the week when you did, or last week I guess it was, when you were working on budget, have already started thinking about some ideas. So it's a pretty big, it doesn't seem like it would be much, but it's a pretty big deal. It's going to be the name of your district for probably 100 years. You don't know. Morgan, do you remember why I put Australian balloting on this?
I think it's because in the draft articles that your side put forward, you guys have talked about voting on the budget from the floor. And that's something that the transitional board is gonna have to tackle, whether they wanna propose that as the default.
Right.
It's Australia.
Is Australian, okay.
So just know that that's gonna come up in conversations with your transitional board as they're trying to come up with what those articles of agreement are. So if you have strong opinions one way or another, you have 2 board members that you can talk to weigh in on.
Right,
that way.
because I guess, yeah, we should talk about that.
And you have time, you're gonna organize on
Right.
January 2nd,
Right.
and then you'll have time, before we go have a ton of time, but they'll have some time in January, or February.
So they're gonna have all that organized from the 18th, the meeting on the 18th to that meeting on the 2nd to have a new board meeting?
They're not, I'll have what?
So,
Not the articles of agreement, that work doesn't start until,
June.
no, after January 2nd. That's when.
They
the
can't do
meeting-
anything until January 2nd. So we can do some of the prep work, but that transitional board doesn't have any authority to make any actions until the 2nd, and we'll need to warn by mid to late January to hit all the warnings for town meeting day. So they'll have 2-3 weeks of official time that they can work to help that.
And that was the next piece I was gonna talk about, was just the work of the transitional board. Those 2 weeks or 3 weeks during that time period, you can expect that we may be meeting, relatively frequently to just try to push through what those articles will look like, and finalize your merged budget. And the other part of that work.
So when does this meeting need to, is there a specific, is the secretary or is there a specific day that this, is it town meeting day that we have to have this meeting on, or do we come up with
Which
it?
meeting, Rick?
Then will we go through all the, whether we vote on the articles of agreement, all that kind of stuff? Is that town meeting day, or is that a separate day?
So town meeting, you're gonna vote for who's gonna be the actual members of the new board.
Okay,
And you're also gonna vote on the articles of agreement
okay.
on town meeting day.
If you want to.
Right.
If you can still, I think you got, if you guys agree to it, you can still have it on a separate day that we can have. No?
You could, well, our budget isn't gonna go before the voters until April now, so they could push
Do it
to
all at
April.
that.
if They needed to, right?
Well, I thought it had to be done, I thought it had to be done before that, but maybe not.
You need to have your official election for your permanent members before you can warn a budget,
Okay.
because it's only that body that gets to warn the budget. So the schedule that we mapped out is on town meeting day, when your town clerks are holding elections anyway, we would do the votes for the 4 or the 6 or however many seats you want. And then that board would get sworn in, and we would need a special election for the budget.
Right.
You are allowed to vote on those articles as well at that same vote, which would be town meeting day. I'm not really sure, but you can probably, anytime you have your voters together, suggest they change one article or another. But I think you want to make your case at that first meeting.
So Rick
You're
or,
talking about the
Rick
90-day thing.
Yeah.
Rick or Polly would bring those articles to the voters on town meeting day?
The transitional board, so it'll be the 4-member board would have to agree and say, yeah, we want to warn these as alternative articles.
Any other questions about that process?
Yeah, but
We'll get clearer.
You're gonna see one a lot, right?
Just go with
And-
it.
I feel like once we get into it and start doing the work, it's gonna feel.
We will be seeing them a lot.
Yes. My last reminder about Rob Evans coming December 18th next week to present to the SU board about school safety measures for future budgeting purposes. And the last thing I had on my agenda was the community center lease agreement, which I think Polly has, right?
No. Oh, but I support more.
I have a copy of it. We did send it through your law firm, and they are now fine with it.
So when we can go into executive to have this conversation if you choose to, because you're talking about lease agreement.
Sure.
Sure. Motion to enter executive at 5:58.
Second.
Who do you, yeah, no there. Who else do you want to stay?
Everybody can, whoever wants to.
Do the principals have to stay?
I don't think you want to stay.
Do you want
We
to?
did.
I mean, no, the only thing we need to do is clear up those files, otherwise.
Yeah, I don't think,
So would you need me after?
No, we can,
No.
Yeah,
Polly
I
would be
know.
happy to let you know when we come out.
Probably has to leave in
Probably have to
1
leave
minute
in
right now, but
Polly's-
I will write it, I will write it out.
So
we can write it
are
down, we can.
principals undone?
Do either of you guys want to stay for this part when they review the lease agreement? And Nate wants to stay? Do you want to stay?
Do you have one, to stay?
What?
no, everyone else.
No.
So Heather had one more thing, and if you remind me when we get out of executive, I can have that case, because it's part of the conversation we had last night. For the budget.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So when
Just
we come
don't
out of
forget.
executive, I'm gonna go to Berkshire.
Okay.
Okay. So are we in executive?
We're in
We're in.
Sure.
So I just wanted to come and give projections for the LEAP's budget for next year and the next 4 years after that. So we're looking at an increase in budgets for various reasons, and we're looking to ask for a contribution from the school boards, from the school budgets of, how do we say it properly, just 40,000 per school, which in some cases is a bigger jump than in other cases.
So the concept behind it is that with the 21C grant, we need to show basically a 50% local match in order to draw down that money, which is going to be in the $400,000 to $500,000 per year range. When we did a first look at the budget, we were kind of quickly realizing that we were going to need more money to hit that 50% match. The 40,000 number, which is a rough estimate at this point, is really based on the local budgets carrying the cost for the site coordinator. So Heather's job would still be out of the grant, but the locals would be covering the Karen Powers, the Julie Snyders, and the folks that we have at Richford. This will be a decision of that new board, barring any changes. So the question that we're still batting around to think is whether the Enosburg Richford side is going to have 3 full sites, which would be 2 elementary schools and Enosburg High School, or we're going to expand and have a full site at Richford High School as well, which we don't currently have. We're just trying to give you guys a heads up that that's looking like, on average, 40,000 per each of the sites that we,
For 3 or for 4?
that's what we're trying to figure out.
But it would be 40
It would be
for
3 or
4.
4.
Either way, it's 40.
We haven't decided if the Richford High School is going to expand to a on-site program or not.
Right, but it would still be 40 per school regardless of if there was 3 or 4?
Yes.
Okay.
And does that include Sheldon in that?
Not on your side.
Not on that, we're.
Okay.
That's on the other side.
And then there are factors of getting that number down, in-kind contributions, the elementary school has fees. So, and I ran off some very rough estimates on what charging students would bring that ask down. If that's a conversation that the school board would like to have.
So what happens with, like in my building, that individual is already a teacher and we're not looking at changing that out? So could the salary for that individual that's already in the local budget count a bit towards that role, or?
Same with Karen Powers, she works full-time for the middle school.
What do you mean the salary that's in the?
Well, she's a full-time PE
Yeah.
teacher and does this as a part-time piece. And when we met, we weren't looking at changing
Right.
that at all.
Right, right.
You know,
Yeah,
still
no, and it's not
leaving
changed
that.
in my current budget right now either, but there's also some other expenses that also are bringing up the total ask.
So those people wouldn't change, they would still be paid out of the SU, if that's your question.
I want to poke at Michelle's question.
Yeah, please, because presently we budgeted 5,000 and that's what we've used in the
Is-
local budget.
Does Julie have any time in her school day position to do some of the coordinator work?
Sure, and then she pushes off what the other position entails. So she
So
doesn't,
my question is, could you make her less than 1.0 PE and make a portion of it after school during the day? And then that could be an in-kind piece
Would
as
that
well,
impact
right?
her
That would
benefits
do
though?
insurance.
I think we need to drill down into that
yeah, that's
Um,
true. It's-
in our office first rather than at
Okay.
a board meeting.
So, yeah, we can have more individual meetings on the in-kind contribution pieces and stuff for working on that too.
How much did the school contribute last year to the after school?
5,000 for Enosburg Elementary and 30 for Enosburg Middle High School.
And now it's 40 on both buildings.
A big driver of this is the loss of safety.
Right, because we're down to, with the exception of Enosburg Elementary, that has fees, we're down to 2 income sources, essentially, as opposed to 3, because we had a large amount of CFP funds in previous years.
If you, have you looked at non-fees everywhere?
Yeah, I run some thoughts on it, and there was the same proposal at the board meeting yesterday as well.
And so we need to just have this conversation when we actually get down to the budget. You said it would be a different board track.
Okay.
So how, I mean, if you include, I mean, it's a guess, but if you include fees being charged at the other, so Enosburg Elementary is the only place that charges fees,
Yes.
is that correct? So if you charge fees everywhere, what does that do to the total amount?
Well, I haven't put it directly into my budgets because the project, we've been staying away from fees for various reasons, so I don't have that directly in my budget, but it's like 10-ish thousand or more per school, depending, we'd have to come up with a fee structure. And then have to have basically like grants or something for families who can't pay. So we can't assume that 100% of the students would be able to pay the fees. And then make the efforts so that families don't feel like that they don't want to participate in LEAPs because there's a fee attached to it as well.
One of the requirements of the grant is that you don't turn away people who truly can't pay for it, and so we have to come up with some kind of
Means.
And I just want to, as an advocate for the program, say that it gives many students in our community a safe place to spend after school time. That's not hanging out unsupervised in the park or in town. It's a like supervised, structured time that if lost would have a negative impact on the community as a whole.
If it went away.
If it went away, we would feel it everywhere.
Would you feel if there was a fee that it would dwindle?
Yeah. There are a lot of families who probably access it because it's free to everybody and would have a lot of pride that if all of a sudden other people were paying that they couldn't pay, but they knew they were being given a scholarship of sorts or something, they wouldn't do it anymore. Some would, but
And that
people would ask, or they would assume they can't afford it without asking, so they just wouldn't.
Or even just like working class, it's like it's gonna be top of the priority list. Send your kids, right? It's $75 a week or.
Yeah, I've seen it affect other programs in the past too. It's a good income source. It's hard to make that change. If you've already had a fee, increasing a fee is easier than adding a fee to a program that was free.
So we already charge fees, right, at the elementary school?
Only at one elementary.
Yep, so I'm curious as to what impact you think charging the fees at the elementary school has?
Yeah.
We fill up every, we say full, because we're cautious about the adult-student ratio and being certain that works. We have had folks say, it's written right on our application form too, please call if this fee is gonna be a difficulty. And we have done what I feel is appropriate to ensure that students are able to access.
The flip side is, having used the program, it's cheaper than daycare.
And
Whereas
we
if you're
know-
middle school and high school, it's not daycare, it's they're taking the
Yes.
bus somewhere or they're walking home. Whereas actually elementary after school was your daycare almost.
What are the fees in Enosburg?
Can I send you a copy of that? I think the second I can't recall. I know we looked at stretching it out so there's a big discount if you're paying for the full year.
Yeah, it's like
And then you
15%
pay increments, yeah. And, I mean, various ways that we worked it out, so folks, if they know they can't do, like, it's like $6 a week if that's what you can do. It's like,
I feel
just
like it
a
was like
smaller
$25
piece.
a week
Yeah, I'd have
per
to
child. Per child.
And then give, like, when you say
multiple
give
siblings
children.
that they give,
Yeah,
it's a
discount.
discount.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a little, the registration from
If you could only do $6, I think I remember paying 75 for 3. So it's cheaper than daycare,
But predicting the income from that, a little bit of a challenge because there's the sliding fees and stuff, so it's hard to say exactly which students are gonna be participating and which students that participate will be able to pay, which is why my numbers are pretty rough on that. And one of the things with Enosburg's budget is transportation. This community has felt that it's very necessary to have transportation that makes the budget pretty high to offer transportation.
That might be a place to look,
Somewhere to consider.
because I don't
agree.
feel like a lot of people utilize the transportation.
Karen and Julie say that they fill up the big bus and the little bus during at least half of the year, because there's like
I feel like
extra
the little bus is
sports.
not, okay.
But yeah, there's like 40 plus students between the two different buses that they use. But busing is a huge cost, and that's something where they've had to cut back last year and in previous years and not offer busing. Again, it's one of those, hate to not have that in the budget since it's being utilized, but it's definitely something to consider. Not having busing would drop from the school year between the two sites approximately $16,000 for the year.
Just to consider. We come back to this when we're done talking on the budget.
Yep. Thank you.
Now you have to.
Okay, now we're gonna make a motion to go into executive. At 6:13.